In my world, a box of stars.
When listening to Jacob Collier's music, it's almost impossible not to get completely taken into his world. On the surface, it has a simple and direct feel, but underneath there are complex harmonic and rhythmic structures at work. Jacob Collier, thankfully, is one of those musicians that lets you look behind the curtain. He's done live streams about his songs, shared his methods of writing, recording and editing his music in masterclasses, and is clearly as enamoured with the process of writing the music as he is with the final product. And one of the things that has always struck me is his love of doing the unexpected, of using some of the most complex and difficult rhythmic and harmonic language in a way that makes it sound effortless. Jacob Collier's approach to pitch and tuning is no different, and as a composer who is fascinated by music that challenges our understanding of tonality, his music is endlessly interesting. But before we get into his songs, we need to define a few things related to microtonality, tuning and temperament. Okay, here we go. Standard pitch, sometimes referred to as concert pitch, is the note that we use to tune all instruments relative to. In Western music, this is taken as A4 equals 440, which means that the A above middle C is tuned to 440 Hz. However, what this doesn't tell you is the relationship between frequencies of notes called intervals, an octave, a fourth, a fifth, and so on. To work this out, what we need is a tuning system, or temperament, which tells us the ratios of frequencies for every interval. For all keyboards, pianos and most instruments made nowadays, we use a tuning system known as equal temperament. This is a system where the octave is divided equally into 12 semitones, meaning the frequency ratio between each semitone is identical. We can represent the ratios between intervals using what's called cents, where a cent is 1/100th of a semitone, meaning that each semitone in equal temperament is 100 cents wide. And as a generality, any deviation from an equally tempered note we call a microtone. Equal temperament, though, is a choice. It's how we've decided to tune our instruments, but it is technically out of tune. It's not the natural way that instruments should be tuned. The temperament that is most in tune is called just intonation, or pure intonation. This is a tuning system that's based on the natural harmonic series of musical notes. If you play a note on an instrument, although you might think that it's made up from a single pitch, what's actually produced is a complex tone made up of a number of additional pitches called harmonics, which are formed by all the sound waves combining and overlapping. Here are all the harmonics based on a C. The important thing to note here is the relationship between the notes, the intervals. In equal temperament, remember that each semitone is 100 cents apart, so a fifth in equal temperament is 7 semitones, so 700 cents. However, in just intonation, a fifth is 702 cents, 2 cents sharper. A fourth, which is 500 cents in equal temperament, is only 498 in just intonation, so 2 cents flat. Major thirds are even lower, they're 14 cents flatter than equal temperament, and minor sevenths are lower still, by 31 cents. Even though all of these notes are different to equal temperament, the only way of getting something perfectly in tune is by using just intonation, as it's based upon the natural harmonic series of the musical instrument. Okay, done. Jacob Collier is aware that pitch and tuning are not fixed. Temperament in particular is something that he takes advantage of a lot, and his use of different temperaments can lead to some remarkable results. In his arrangement of fascinating rhythm, for example, he uses just intonation to achieve a different tuning for the same note in almost consecutive chords in bar 85 and 86. The chord on the last quaver of bar 85 on B is formed by stacking fourths, from a bottom F sharp up to a top C. In order to do this, it requires 6 fourths, F sharp to B, B to E, E to A to D, D to G, and then G to C. But because in just intonation each fourth is 2 cents lower than the equivalent interval in equal temperament, if you tune each fourth relative to the last note, the top note ends up being 12 cents lower than it would be otherwise, 6 lots of 2. This definitely sounds flat. But in the chord on the fourth quaver of bar 86, there is also a C on top, but it's tuned differently to the previous C. This chord is based on stacking fifths instead of fourths, 8 fifths to be precise. And as every fifth in just intonation is 2 cents too high, the top C ends up being 16 cents higher than if tuned using equal temperament. So in the space of a few seconds, he has sung 2 what we'd call Cs, but they have a difference of 28 cents, which is just over a quarter of a semitone. You can compare what Jacob Collier is doing with temperament and tuning systems to a lot of work by 20th and 21st century composers. Things like Julian Anderson's imagined cornice, which uses a number of horns playing in just intonation as well as equal temperament. Here he notates the flattened and sharpened notes using alterations of normal flat and sharp signs. These indicate the points at which the notes deviate from equal temperament. Other composers, called spectral composers, wrote works which placed the harmonic series right at the centre of the work. Gérard Griset's Partielle, for example, is based upon the harmonic series produced by a low E played on a trombone. The composers also played around with pitch and tuning of instruments, going so far as to tune instruments differently within the same ensemble. Thomas Addis's Asila uses a D-tuned piano, which has been shifted a quarter of a tone down relative to every other instrument, possibly inspired by Charles Ives' 3/4 tone pieces for 2 pianos. Unsuk Chin's Akrostick and Wortspiel has multiple instruments tuned between a sixth and a quarter of a tone higher than normal pitch, somewhere between 33 and 50 cents. This produces an amazing effect, as you only really hear the difference in tuning when all the instruments play the same note at the end of the piece. All of these pieces might sound initially difficult to listen to, but they're really all trying, I think, to achieve the same goal, which is to add colour, and I think that's exactly what Jacob Collier is doing. He uses tuning, and pitch in particular, to add colour to his songs. Hideaway is a perfect example. In order to get the feeling that the song is opening up, he uses a different pitch at the beginning compared to the rest of the song. The piece starts at A4 equals 432 Hz. But by the end of the first verse he has arrived at A4 equals 440. You can hear this by comparing the guitars at the beginning and end of the piece. But the way he shifts pitch is incredibly subtle. He does it by using the second note in the melody, which is the major third in D major, to pivot between A4 equals 432 and A4 equals 440.
Take me.
By tuning the major third closer to equal temperament than just intonation, when it eventually shifts into the higher pitch, this same F sharp ends up being justly tuned in A4 equals 440.
Touch me.
But Jacob Collier's love of doing the unexpected is most obviously heard in the last verse of In the Bleak Midwinter. I don't think any other composer or artist would be so daring as to have a whole verse in a microtonal key. In this case, G quarter sharp major, halfway between G and G sharp major. And just like every other use of tuning, temperament or microtonality in all of his songs, it doesn't feel forced. It feels like a natural progression of the sound world and tonality that he has created. It takes enormous talent and an incredible ear to be able to use these very complex techniques in his compositions, and to use them in a way that doesn't detract from the meaning or conviction of the song, just confirms how intelligent and sensitive a musician he is. Jacob Collier is a once-in-a-generation artist that seems to break down boundaries between musical genres, and I think that's in part because he has the ability to create music that is incredibly complex, but is also, at the same time, direct, uplifting, and full of life. I'm hugely indebted in particular to June Lee for this essay, whose videos about Jacob Collier were an enormous help. I couldn't have created this without them. If you liked it, then please do take a look at my channel, as well as looking at June Lee's astonishing transcriptions of Jacob Collier's songs, some of which I've linked below. See you next time.